the Europeans having this very unique contract law at the time that just wasn't shared around the world. And we can even go back to the Italian city-states, medieval city-states. They largely began this contract law, particularly in the more modern age, and this is something that fed out into the Portuguese travellers, the Spanish, and of course the French and the British later on, the Dutch and so on. So the different cultures can sometimes encourage people to take a negative view of other attitudes and other ways of doing business and behaviours and so on, which today we say, well, that's racist, but it's not really. It's just a value judgment on how other people behave in a given situation, and it may not necessarily be anything to do with race. So that's at least my experience. As a young man, I used to have very left-wing views. I was a rabid communist at 19.
Really?
And 19 was a long time ago, but as I got older, I had to become more practical, particularly when you have children and mortgages and all sorts of things like that. So it creates a big change in a young man, those sort of responsibilities. But I went to a company that I worked for, had a warehouse in an area that is very non-white, and in Sydney, and it was my first sort of direct experience with that sort of environment, and after watching and observing the people there and how self-destructive their behaviours were in terms of alcohol and various substance abuse, and just very self-destructive all around, I started to take a different view and realised that the easy sort of thing to do is to say that everyone else is racist, but the hardest thing to do is to understand the difficulties and the nuance and the details, and it's easy to have quick push button solutions, but when you're close up to those sorts of things, you need to have a broader view and understand that there are no quick, easy solutions, and sometimes it just takes a lot of hard work and a lot of understanding and so on. But anyway, that's me waffling on about racism. But the big news is you moving out into the hinterland of Sweden. How far away from Stockholm are you thinking of moving?
It's about 3 hours from Stockholm. Yeah, we had a look at this place a few months ago, and we always sort of came back to it. We've been looking at different places for quite some time, but this place was always in our hearts, so to speak. And there was a bidding going on, and it took some time, and then finally we got it. So we signed the contract yesterday. Yeah, it's a beautiful place. It's high up, and very nice garden. It's like 7.5 acres of land, so it's not that big, but it's a beautiful place, and we're looking forward to it.
Okay, well, was it once a farm previously, a strawberry farm or something like that?
Exactly, it was a big farm once, and then when they died, basically the people they just sold out the land around it, and they kept this place, which is, as I said, 7.5 acres. So it's basically the farmhouse. You know, it's 4 houses all together. Uh, Big barn. You know.
Well, what will you do with the land and those extra houses? Will you create a new psychological conditioning for people that want to come across from the dark side to the light?
Yeah, I got that suggestion already. I will not. No, we're gonna just live there. We're gonna do things, of course. We're gonna do some gardening. We're gonna have some geese, some chicken,
Yeah.
grow tomatoes, things like that. And I will do some activity. I haven't really decided yet, but I'm a painter, so I will do that, of course. And I'm also a writer, so I will also write. But there's going to be some work. It's big fields still. You see, you need to take care of them.
Is the
and the
machinery
houses.
all there? Is that coming with the farm? The necessary machinery to cultivate and so on?
No,
Do you have
nothing.
to buy machinery? Oh, okay.
Nothing. It's totally emptied out, and it's been empty since 2015. So, so we just have to make it happen.
Well, that sounds really exciting. I think a lot of people dream of, particularly people in city life, they dream of going to more rural atmosphere and things like growing their own vegetables and their own herbs and, as you say, having chickens and so on. And it's quite a romantic sort of perspective on life. But will you need to come to the city will you need to commute at all for business reasons or anything else?
No,
The 3 hour drive? No.
no, not me. My girlfriend, yes, she will need to go to Stockholm occasionally, but I will go to Stockholm just to visit family and friends, maybe twice a year. That's my plan. And then, of course, I will invite them out there. So no, I don't have to work. You know, I'm doing fine. So, and I'm soon to be retired. So I'm going to sell this house and sell my company and just do what I want to do. And I will
Okay.
continue to do the videos, of course.
Uh, 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 you seem to have a real passion for it, and it seems to be working very well, of course. Just on this what's happening in Scandinavia, you mentioned in one of your videos about the Norwegian government signing or intending to sign the United Nations Migration Pact, which of course technically at least opens the door to mass migration to Norway. I was very surprised by this. The signs and signals I'd seen suggested that the Norwegians may not sign it, or there was going to be further discussion at the very least in their parliament. But then, quite suddenly, they seem to have decided to go ahead with it. What do you believe happened there? Why did that unfold, and what do you think might be the implications of them signing that pact?
Yeah, I was disappointed, but I was not surprised. I have observed this change in the Norwegian government for some time. They used to have an interior minister whose name was Listhaug, and she was very good, not politically correct, very outspoken. And then she was taken out. And this happened maybe a year ago, I think. So I know that something was going on. What I think is happening in Norway is that the globalists are starting to get a hold of the Norwegian politicians, you know, through all these meetings and travels and corruption or whatever. And they are slowly but surely becoming more uh, in tune with the globalist agenda. And that's what they are now. That's what I think. They are basically globalists, and their aim is to open the borders, really. If they can do it, that's another question, because the Norwegians, the citizens, are pretty, this is my opinion, they are pretty awake to these things. And you know, they know a lot about what's going on in Sweden. So there is a much more healthy debate in Norway compared to Sweden. So if they can do this, I don't know, but they will sure try. I'm certain about this. So I'm absolutely disappointed with the Norwegian politicians, but not surprised.
Do you think there's a possibility that they could reverse their position and repudiate the pact, or do you think it's a done deal now? Nothing can change it.
I don't know. I think they
Yeah.
will sign it, you know.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't be surprised if there is now a discussion in Norway from experts, uh, you know, wanting to get Norway back or into the EU. It's very hard, but I'm sure they will try this. So it's a globalist agenda. They are working. They are not giving up on Norway, you see. So it's just a matter of tricking the citizens, basically, or making them ignorant about the problems. And, all this bullshit propaganda. They are working hard for to get Norway back to or into the EU, and signing this United Nations Migration Pact is just one step. So that's what I think. I'm sad about this because I was very positive about the Norwegian government, just before Listhaug was removed. But now I'm worried, and I know I have some Norwegian friends, and they are absolutely worried, and there will be a fight in Norway too.
I wonder what the attraction of Norway is to the globalists. It's a fairly sort of small. I think it's got a population of what, 4 million or something like that. I wonder why they put so much effort into getting that. Maybe it's that North Sea coastline and the fishing and the oil and the gas that's offshore. Maybe there are other things that play a role in this. But it seems although you can understand how they'd want to keep the United States in the globalist sort of family. You can see why they're so much after Trump and trying to break him down, because they've got to bring the United States back. It's 20% of the world economy. If they can't control the United States, the globalist that is, then they've got a real struggle on their hands. But Norway, it's what, a quarter of 1% of the world economy. It doesn't seem to make sense. I wonder if there's something else going on there that we're missing, that we're not seeing.
What I think is that, they are not happy unless they have everyone on board. And I think they are disturbed by the fact that Norway is not in the EU. So they are just, they want it their way. That's the thing. And of course, it's a rich country, and they are strong. They have a strong position as diplomats, for instance, and people tend to listen to Norwegians, I think. So
Yeah.
they will not give up, and they are not. That's one of the things that I've realized while have been doing all these videos and doing research, is that this agenda is brutal. This globalist agenda, it's absolutely brutal, and it's planned all along. It's a definite plan, and they are not stopping. They are not stopping for anything. Just look at the UK now. This is despicable what they are doing to the UK, where you have a referendum and they would just won't let it happen. They will fight till the bitter end. And even if they lose, which they did in the referendum, they just don't give up. They just want this globalist idea all over the place. Everybody should be involved. Yeah, it's very interesting to watch this. It's scary, actually.
I've been trying to plot when this globalization sort of plan really hatched in the minds of the elites. How far back was it? Was it the time of the Hart-Celler Act in the United States, when they changed the migration to accept non-white people into the United States as migrants, particularly from Mexico and so on? Was it 1965? Was it in the 70s after the oil shock? At what point? And I don't know the answer. But I'm interested. Maybe some of the viewers will have an opinion on that. But I'm trying to do video now on when did the globalization movement actually begin? Maybe as a plan or a concept or an idea at first, and then gradually took. Because I don't think it could really have started until the Berlin Wall came down. That had to be an unexpected developments that maybe accelerated the plans that they had, or maybe there were fresh plans made around that. But the globalists want all the economies of the world brought into into a global economy, and that wasn't really possible when there was China and the Soviet Union, the Soviet bloc, or all sort of cordoned off or behind the Iron Curtain, as they used to say. But once that the communism ended and China became more commercial with their communism, then that changed the whole landscape. And it was then, and particularly after, say, China signed the World Trade Organization treaty and came in there. So say from 1999 onwards, that's when it really started to accelerate. But the planning and the ideas must have occurred decades beforehand,
Yeah.
because they won't let it go. They've planned it for so long, as you say, they won't let it go and they hang on tight. But I almost think that they're starting to lose now and they're panicking. And when people panic like that, they overreach and they start making silly mistakes. And I wonder what, if you look at Theresa May, and she has, as I understand it, no relatives or children. So what? Why would she sell out to the globalists, as I believe she is? Why would she sell out to the globalists when she's got no son or daughter that's working for a big bank or something, or no brother or sister that's employed with some big property developer? So there's no benefit to her to do this, and she can't possibly believe it's a good thing. So what hold do the globalists have over people like Theresa May, or people in the United States Senate, or the Norwegians, or for that matter, some of the Swedish government or European government, Angela Merkel and so on? What hold do they have that makes these people do these things? Because they don't seem to be agreeing with it. They can't sell it and say, this is a great idea, this is a wonderful thing, and this is why it's wonderful. They can't do that, but they're still doing it anyway. Macron is another example. So I'm wondering what the globalists, how they make these people toe the line and enact and institute globalist friendly policies. I'm still working on that one. I don't know. Do you have a view on that?
Yes, I do. I have a theory about this. Globalism, I think, is the modern way to destroy civilizations and make people into slaves. That's my theory. You know, they tried it with Nazism, they tried it with communism, and it failed. And this is the new modern system. And so they rally up all these politicians that can work for them and continue to work for them and make this agenda happen. So it's just basically a determination to destroy. That's my theory. So now we will find all these very evil guys at the top of the pyramid, and then you will find these neurotic, confused politicians who just follow these orders and carry out the orders. You see, that's my idea, and I think it started, as you said, really uh, by the end of the Soviet Union, and the wall came down in Berlin. That's when it really took off. But I think it started earlier, this idea. I think it started after the war, the World War II, Second World War. Yeah. And I think Theresa May is an interesting woman. Absolutely. I think she's no bloody good to start off with. She's not that bright. I don't think so. And she's just a puppet for these guys. And she wants to do well. She wants her seniors to think fondly of her and to help her career. And that's what they have been doing. We see this example in Sweden right now. We have this female politician, Annie Lööf, and she's on the strings. She's a marionette to these globalists. And you just watch her and you see her talking, and she's destroying her own party. She doesn't care anything about the Swedish citizens. She just wants to make this goal. She wants to create this fantastic globalist goal for Sweden. And she's relentless. It's amazing to watch this. She's not that very, she's not that bright, this woman. She's just, she knows the words, she knows what to say, and she knows how to react. And people used to trust her, and some, of course, still do. But I think people are starting to see through this facade. It's just air coming out of her mouth, and you can see the disaster that it would bring if she was to decide what would happen in Sweden. So it's fascinating to watch this. I don't think she's evil. She's just sort of neurotic, stupid.
Deluded, yeah. Um, it's interesting that the globalist politicians, the ones that seem to just speak the global mantra, they it seems to me at least that none of them are very bright. They're not capable of original thought. As you say, they're puppets given words to just. And a number of people have said to me that President Obama, well, his only skill was that he could read from a teleprompter, and maybe that's true. Because if you look at some of the things, he had no idea where jobs could come from. And Donald Trump,
Exactly.
President Trump, has brought a lot of these jobs back, and he seemed to have no understanding of the economy and the key things. So maybe, as you say, he's just a puppet, like this lady you mentioned in Sweden and elsewhere, Theresa May and Macron. Macron's a classic puppet, the guy who comes from nowhere, financial merchant banking background. Suddenly he's got all this support. It's got the fingerprints of globalists all over it. But I hope the Brexit thing sorts itself out, because it seems to be that every day is some new embarrassment or some new act of silliness, and it looks like it's not going to end well. No matter what happens, it's going to be unfortunate. But I hope the British people get it together. You mentioned in one of your videos about Macron, he's particularly disappointed you in some of the things he's been saying, particularly his criticism of President Trump and his issues with nationalism and his deliberate and foolish confusion that as soon as nationalism mentioned, it means everyone's a fascist or something. And that's completely absurd. The idea that your own country and your own the interests of your own country and your own population are important, to say that means you're a fascist is absolutely ridiculous. And it annoys me whenever I hear it, because a lot of students at senior high school and university, they repeat this now. If you say Sweden first, that's it, Nazis and fascists and this and that, and it's quite ridiculous. And by doing that, he's it's like he's still at high school or university. He's still a kid running around. You're an Nazi.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous, and he's meant to be the president of one of the great nations of Europe, and he's saying these things, and I wonder who put him up to it, though. It's got to be this globalist script writers that
Yeah.
have said it. Um,
Yeah.
but
I mean, no, Macron, he reminds me of he's just like a robot with a little kid's brain. You know, he's got these orders and he knows what to say, but it's like he can't think. You know what I mean? He can't
mm,
figure out. He's got this conflict now with Mr. Trump, and he can't just figure out what's going on. So he just goes on with these mantras. You know, it's fascinating to watch this. I mean,
uh,
look at Trump. He's a good example. I mean, this guy he can wing it. You know what I mean? He can look at things, he can look at the situation, he can change his mind, you know, like a normal person. But this guy Macron, he's like just like this Swedish politician that I talked about. She can't
mm,
change the way she thinks. So it's like she can't think. You know, just like it's like a robot, you know, you tell them what to do, what to say, and they will do it. So it's fascinating. And
uh,
another thing about Macron and also our Swedish friend that I talked about, you know, they got all this support from media, from the establishment. You know, they want these guys to rule, so they get all the support. And
uh,
I'm very curious about what's going to happen in the UK, because I think the British citizens are starting to realize that you know, they voted to leave, right? And then they sort of couldn't get it really, and now they think now we are getting it. But I think they are starting to realize that if we are going to get a proper Brexit, we will have to do something really, because these guys, they will try to trick us again and again and again. See, they won't stop, these guys, these globalists. They just can't take no for an answer. Just won't do it, you see. And it's fascinating to watch what's going on in the UK, because I this is my opinion. I think the British citizens are very much awake, and then they got a bit more awake, and now they are starting to realize that if they don't do anything, they are fucked. They won't get Brexit. So it's good to watch this, and I sure hope that they will get it. It's very important for all of us.
Oh, yes, it is. And it's important that President Trump wins another term, I believe, in the United States as president. It's interesting that the globalists didn't need to tamper with the vote, the Democratic vote, because they controlled all the major political parties. They controlled the media, they controlled academia, and they controlled the movie making, Hollywood, all that sort of thing. So they controlled the entire narrative, the entire message, and the political parties, and a lot of the public service even. So they didn't need to corrupt the voting process itself. It wasn't necessary because they controlled everything. Because it didn't matter which party was voted in; they all did the same thing. But when
Exactly.
Brexit happened and when President Trump won office, suddenly they're now scared of the voting process itself. That's the last thing.
Exactly.
They didn't think they'd need to do that, and now with so now they're scared. And as we saw in the midterm elections in the United States, there's been what appears to me, at least, and in my opinion, a deliberate attempt to actually corrupt the vote itself, to corrupt
Yeah.
the ballot papers and the vote counting. And that's the next step they have to go to. And that might be the point of overreach, because once they go there, they can't go back anymore. And once that step is taken, then the whole facade has fallen away, and then they're fully exposed, and they may not be able to survive that. And it'd be interesting to see how that plays out, but I hope it doesn't, because if they corrupt the vote, particularly with the Electoral College and vote counting in the United States, they've effectively ended the democratic process as we understand it, sort of the citizen voting and the citizen deciding which government they want and what government they want. They've effectively corrupted or ended that cycle. So maybe democracy, because democracy hasn't been around that long. It's only been around for 100 years. Maybe that democracy and voting, the people voting, is simply a blip in history that's about to be consigned to history as having no use or value to the globalists. And that's a pretty scary thought.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think this is the next step in this war. You know, they have to get rid of democracy because democracy is not working in their favor anymore. So they just have to do it, and they will try. And I think they have already. I know the Swedish election was very suspicious. It was. People were very surprised at the result. And I think this is my suspicion, at least, that it was rigged. So that's the next step, and they already started. I think they are trying to get rid of free speech, for instance. They are working hard at this, and this is the vital part, of course, of democracy. They just have to get rid of democracy, or they will lose in the end. And I
Uh,
think if there is another UK referendum on the membership in the EU, I think they will try it. They will,
yes,
they
yes,
will
I
try
think
to
so.
rig that referendum. Yeah.
Did you ever read or see the movie 1984, the George Orwell movie?
Yeah.
Did you ever see that? There was a version made in the late 1940s with, I think, Peter Cushing playing the lead role, and another version made in the 1980s with John Hurt, who playing the lead role along with Richard Burton and some others. And there's a scene close to the end where the John Hurt character, who's the Winston character, he he's strapped up to some table being tortured, and he says to the torturer, in the end, in the end, the people will beat you. They will tear you to pieces in the end. And I somehow I have that faith that in the end that the people and through whether it be through the democratic process or other expressions of the will of the people, I believe that in the end they will win. Maybe we need a longer time horizon to understand this or to see it, but it appears the globalists have been winning all the time up until very recently, really, up until Brexit and the election of President Trump. Really, it looked like the globalists had won, and now it looks like it's turning into a more even struggle. But it's still uncertain. It still hangs in the balance. But I hope in the end the 1984 prediction that the globalists will be torn to pieces. I hope that's more of the true reflection of the outcome than the other one, which is the people become, as you say, just become slaves to the globalists.
Yeah,
very very scary.
very good. Yeah, this is so true. Why do the EU now want an army? That's the question, isn't it? I think, I think, I think they are aware of this threat against themselves. I mean, we're looking at these societies, and we think that these people are civilized, but they're really not. When it comes down to it, they are as uncivilized as they ever were, and yeah, so they are in danger. These guys who are trying to enslave the world, basically.
Yeah,
So
the history repeats itself, and for people who don't remember or understand it, they seem to forget that in Weimar Germany after 1919, the constitution required a 53% majority for any party or a combination of parties to form government, and 53% in an electoral process is quite a lot. Normally, it's the 50-51% type range, but so 53% was quite a lot, which meant it was very difficult for any party to form a clear majority unless it was in a large coalition. So the state was very weak and enfeebled, and they had quite a small police force. And the communists saw their chance, and they had these street gangs running around, beating people up and intimidating public officials and beating up judges and tax collectors and going into schoolrooms demanding that communist theory was taught and all these sorts of things. And so there was a counter street gang that was set up to oppose the communists, and that later on became what was known as the Nazi Party. But there were these street gangs running around running battles with pickaxe handles and knives and all sorts of things. And if you look at that struggle on the street, because of the state was too feeble and because the ideologies were in conflict, history in some ways is repeating itself now with the bringing in of a lot of migrants who were causing all sorts of unrest in the cities and elsewhere. And it seems to me that there's not a direct parallel, and I'm not suggesting that it's exactly the same today as it was then, but in terms of that paradigm of the conflict and the ideology and the inability to use the processes available at the time to sort it out, it seems to be that it's happening again, and that we're making the same as a race, and we're making the same mistakes as we made then, and that people are acting selfishly or too late, or they're not decisive enough. And we see things like Tommy Robinson and Count Dankula and so on, which inflame an already difficult situation, and you wonder, where are these things going to go, and will it be, as you say, a civil ending, and can people sort these things out? I don't believe so. As you've said a number of times, things probably have to get worse before they get better.
yeah, this is true. I mean, if they take away democracy and people realize that democracy is taken away from them, people will get pissed off and they will react to it. And then the EU will need an army to protect their bureaucrats.
Yeah, well, will that be the same street? Because it won't be an army in the common sense of in the idea of an army to invade or protect from invasion. It's going to be what a lot of people believe, effectively an internal militia force to suppress the population and to be turned against its own people. I don't know if an army would actually do that. Would they fire on their own citizens? I know that'll be an interesting one. That'll be the real test, because if the army won't fire on their own citizens, the globalists have lost immediately. So if they roll that dice, if they play that card, then they're betting everything on a single card, and that's for them. You'd think that would be a step too far. Just on the globalists, at Oxford University, Steve Bannon, President Trump's former advisor, and I think he was the editor of Breitbart. He was at the university, and he was invited there to make a speech to the I think it was the students and students' union, and he gave quite a good speech talking about globalization, about the global financial crisis in 2008, the declining middle class in the West, the deindustrialization of the West. The Western jobs going to China, the heavily reducing purchasing power of particularly younger people in the West, so that they can't start families or buy houses, that sort of thing. I thought it was a pretty good speech, and it's online for anybody who wants to have a look. But then it came to question time. And the only questions these idiot students could ask, and this is Oxford University, we're not talking some third or fourth tier bullshit university from out the back blocks here. This is Oxford, so it's in the category with Harvard and the greatest universities of the world. And all they wanted to talk about was neo-Nazis and was he a fascist and a racist and doesn't he like Muslims, and oh goodness me, I was outraged by this. He's made this great speech, and these students were planted. They were given their bullshit questions, and they were told to or put up to asking them. And it was a real travesty seeing someone like that going through these very important issues, and there was not one question. It was just straight leftist talking points, BBC, Joe Coburn bullshit and all this sort of thing. There was nothing there in terms of engaging with the intellect that he brought to the room and brought to the thing there. And I was deeply upset by it, insofar as this is where our students are going. It's like that girl in Sweden that got on the plane to stop the guy getting Erin Erson, whatever her name was. It's like she's replicated. It's like there's a factory and they just make people like her, and they just send them to all the universities, and that's it. That's all that's there. And
I think you're right. It's a factory.
so
Yeah.
so that's well, that's about all I had. Was anything else you'd like to go over or talk about?
No, it's fine. It's nice talking to you again. Looking
Okay, well,
forward
I
to the.
enjoy these. It's if we can do one a fortnight or one a week, it's up to you. Whatever you think's a good thing.
It's very,
I'll get a
very good.
copy of this over to you and see what you think. Thanks, Stefan. Talk soon.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Thank you.
Okay, bye. Bye.
Bye.